Hello everybody. Welcome to Cosmic Metamorphosis. My name is Kat. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm sorry I wasn't able to get a video out last week. I just did not have time with work and just not having enough time to do anything. And I really am just struggling with trying to get anything done lately. It just feels like I never have enough time to do anything with having to go to work and take care of the household and everything. Um, I have two of my cats in here today, so I'm probably going to have to put them out because I made the mistake of giving them catnip and now they're hyper and they're wrestling. Let's see, come here, say hi, say hi. Here's my kitten Nori. Isn't she adorable? She's the one we found in the middle of the road. She's getting big. Hi, Nori. And then we have Binks. I haven't seen Binks in a while. Hi, Binks. Hi, Binks. That's Binks. Okay, go play. Oh, my goodness. And so I've been busy doing things. So before we get into the Alex Collier December 2nd webinar, I just want to go over, what I've been doing besides work. I went to lunch with a good friend of mine who's from Germany. She's living here now with her husband, who's American, and her name is Christine too. So it's kind of, yeah, that's my real name, but I go by Kat if you don't know, because that's my initials, and I love cats. So yes. Anyway, besides work, I have been insulating the outdoor kitties' houses. Basically, they're small dog houses, but I got them for the stray cats that are outside, the two that I am taking care of and feeding. So I knew we were going to get a horrible cold front in. Today it's 10 degrees outside. This cold front is horrible. It was probably below zero last night. Today the sun is out though, and the sun is really nice and warm if you're sitting in the sun. But man, they have been doing chemtrailing a ton this morning. And again, I think I'm going to start paying attention because I do think it's detoxing us. I've heard several people say that in the community as well now. So it's not just me, because I don't see how the Alliance or the White Hats could allow this to still be going on with us. There's got to be a way that they are repairing our atmosphere. Okay. But anyway, there's been a lot of it this morning. And I kind of got a notion that maybe it's helping. This is just my theory because I know that we're also in this photon belt. And there's a portion, if you look up any information on this photon belt, as we are going through this photon belt, we're going to hit this point where it's like the 3 days of darkness, where it is just so cold, so cold. You just want to stay in bed, like you're just cold to the bone. Okay, and it's supposed to last for several days. And I'm just wondering if maybe they're just spraying because of, maybe they're trying to create a greenhouse effect and keep the heat in as we're going through this extreme cold. I don't know, it's just a thought. Anyway, but the kitty houses outside, I ordered a bunch of thermal insulation with the like foil and stuff. And so I aligned the inside of their houses with that because I knew it was going to be really cold. So they've got the new insulation on the roofs, on the bottoms, on the sides of the house. And I put their blankets back in and the thermal blankets. Bella, she's the black outdoor kitty, and she's got the 7 toes. So she's very sweet, and she's really let me pet her a whole lot lately. So she really loves the attention. And she comes around pretty much all day long, all night long. Jasper. He's the black and white one. I don't think he won't follow me to the house, so I'm not sure he knows there's a second house out there to take shelter in. Um, so I've been taking care of them. And then I plan, since today's the 22nd of December, I hope y'all had a wonderful winter solstice yesterday. I lit some candles in the room and I had a little glass of wine and I just kind of celebrated that way. So just to honor it, um, it's the least I can do. And this Saturday for Christmas Eve, I am off, thank God, and we are closed, thank God, for Sunday. So I plan to make a Yule log cake. I made one a few years ago. It was really good. So that is my plan for Saturday, to do the Yule log cake and to dip some pretzel bits in some chocolate and then roll them in the peppermint candy cane. So I have plans to be cooking, baking Saturday anyway. So, and I've been thinking of maybe giving notice at work. I just can't do it anymore. I'm in the position again where I was before in another previous job, where basically the management has to take over for associates because we have no one. We lost two of our cashiers, um, and basically we only have a daytime cashier that only works in the morning to like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. After that, anybody who comes in, you're basically at the cash register all day long. And I've been spending most of my time, probably 80 to 85% of my time, as a cashier. And that's not the position that I wanted to do. I was hired as a shift supervisor and I'm not doing it. So I've been pondering whether just to give my notice as well. And I feel guilty because they're really good people and I hate to do it to them, but it's not the position that I wanted to do. So I've been thinking about that. So many things, huh? Anyway, okay, so hopefully y'all, my Texas accent is coming out. Um, let's get into the Alex Collier December 2nd webinar from this year, number 171. So Alex says, hello, Knights. It's good to see you. It is good to be with you all. Says hello from Colorado. It's exciting times, ladies and gentlemen, exciting times. Now we're going to cover some things today. I will try to work on seeing into fourth density. He says, I will do my best on that. I will do my best, but there's a lot of things to cover. And he says, I could make current stat the entire 2 hours, but I know the question and answer part is very important. Which now let me tell you, it used to be 2 hours, his webinars, and now it's 2.5 hours. So it does take me extra long because literally a half an hour of transcribing, of having to listen, write, and stop and start and stop and start and write. Like just a half an hour probably takes me hour and a half, probably. So it takes time. He says, so I'm going to start with a couple of things. First, he says, throughout the presentation today, as I cover current stat, I want all of you to remember we are watching a movie. He says, now, they told us this right up front, and it's amazing how that fact keeps slipping off the table. And then people get caught up in a lot of the drama. Says, but it's really important to remember that we're watching a movie. This has been scripted. Oh my God, and hasn't it? Like I've said before, I feel like the things we are seeing that's being put out there is literally so ridiculous. How could you not? Like it, there's no way possible this could be true, could be real. Like it's definitely a movie. It's definitely scripted. My goodness. It says in order to not only wake up humanity to what these morons wanted to do to us. But at the same time, they're also exposing to ourselves, mirroring back to us the lunacy of some of our belief systems, such as flat earth, climate change, etc., etc., etc. Says many things. He says, now I understand that some people will take offense to that. He says, okay, I'm good with that. I am. He says, I'm really good with that. So let's just get on with what we're going to do here today. He says, now, I want to start off with Australia. I absolutely stand behind what I shared with you all several weeks ago, a couple weeks ago. He says, absolutely stand behind it. Says now Simon Parks and Charlie Ward apparently did a program together, and they were saying that there are tribunals going on military ships. I don't know that for a fact. He says that twice. I don't know that for a fact. Says, but let me share something that I do know for a fact, and I talked about this a while back, maybe several months. It says here in America, in the United States, our ports, the port of Long Beach, Los Angeles, Oakland, Washington State, Seattle, Houston, there are many cargo ships, some from all over the world. The majority of them are from China. It says now, the delay with the cargo ships being unloaded is because the special forces, Navy SEALs, and others were going through the crates using technology they could see inside the crates. I mentioned this many videos back. They have technology. They can see through these things. They've only shown little bits of what, like the ground penetrating radar and stuff, things they can see underground, but they have technology. They can see through metal. They know what's in there. So I'm glad he was saying this as well. It says they're separating actual cargo products from missile launching platforms that were from China. Sorry if that was low. In some of these containers, and then you have the Australian ships. He says they were also delivering product, but sadly on these ships there were containers, he says plural, that had children and young people in them. It says now, if there was no life inside of these containers, they would put them back on the ship to be returned to Australia. If there were products, they were allowed to be offloaded. Now, this was not only going on with United States forces, but also on site and on hand were Canadian forces. It says now, those boats were told to return to their ports of harbor or point of origin with those containers with the bodies in them back to Australia. Would it surprise you to know that that our Navy is there with those ships and are going, and that's where they're going or have already arrived? Now, military personnel from both the United States and Canada were on board all those boats. Those boats were tracked via satellite and aircraft, some by submarine, to make sure not only did they get there and return, but they did not dump their cargo, because whoever wrote the manifest for those containers is or already has been paid a visit. Bastards, right? Do you understand what I'm saying to you? He says. Sadly, Australia, it's a terrible issue. It's a terrible issue all over the world. You need to have that peace so that you can keep what's happening there in perspective. Now, as much as the Australian people would be incredibly enthusiastic about the removal of their heads of state, unfortunately, your local police departments are virtually all on the take. That's a whole nother issue. So that's why there's a whole lot of things going on there. They're being done very, very quietly, and that is to keep the people protected as much as possible. How is this going to spill out into the open? There's no question about it. He says, But I want you to understand, Australia, that there's many, many other things going on in the background. We're not just there for R&R, for shore leave. He says that's not what's happening. Because you also have to look at the idea that the two naval bases were given, I think, by majors to Pfizer Medical Company. It says they were basically given leases to hold and control two of your military bases at the western point of Australia. I've been told not to give the names, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. That's coming to an end as well. So there's a lot of things going on, and just know this: there's no way we're going to leave you hanging. Says it isn't going to happen. It's not going to happen. We're not leaving you hanging. So that's the Australian piece, he says. Now, because this is a movie, many things have been scripted. And what I mean by that is that events that are taking place have been forced to occur. In other words, the deep state has been pushed and forced into a position that's completely unattainable for them. Because their real strength, the loyalty of those who were supporting this very, very dark agenda was never real. It's based on bribery, fear, and blackmail. Okay? So, in order to strip that away from their power base, several things have to occur, and they are beginning to unfold. He says, well, let me just say they have been unfolding, but no, they're coming into the limelight. Everybody's beginning to see it. It's becoming visible. So here's what we're going to start with. I know the US dollar says what we call the US dollar is actually a private currency. It is printed by the Federal Reserve System, which is a Rothschild central bank. Every country in the world has one, with the exception of three nations, or should I say had: North Korea, South Korea, and Iran. It says they did not at any time have a Rothschild central bank. The rest of them did. Now all the BRICS nations have broken away from the Rothschild central bank. And we will cover those guys in a minute, or in a few minutes. He says now the primary dollar, the primary currency of this realm of the Rothschild central bank system, the IMF, Bank of International Settlements, has been the U.S. Federal Reserve note, a debt instrument, a fiat currency, in other words, paper and ink with pictures on it. He says that's it. That's all it is. That's all it ever was, and that's all it ever will be. They make money. He says, well, the world is rejecting it. The United States is being forced into a corner because no one wants the fake currency any longer. Now countries that invested heavily in the United States treasuries, which was most countries, are now dumping treasuries. They can't get rid of them fast enough. They will take pennies on the dollar. They'll take the loss. They simply don't want it. It says it's dark. It has a horrible frequency to it because of what it represents. Now, this is not a reflection on the American people, although we certainly need to step up and help this process. But those behind those central banks are extremely dark beings. And I specifically remember I was 17 years old. I was standing in our laundry room. Our house hadn't been finished, so it didn't have drywalls. It was just bare, like studs. And I had the picture clear as day in my mind. And I was telling my parents, I said, money is evil. I said, money is evil. I said, in this world is hell. Those were my words. Like, I knew it at 17. And, that was how many years ago? Wow. So, yeah, I've been awake for a long time. And I'm just so glad that all of this is finally coming out. He says now, since September, the U.S. Treasury hasn't even had an auction to sell Treasury bonds because no one showed up, and there have been no bidders. So the fake Biden administration, or whoever it is playing him, is not truly president, has been printing money to the tune of $1 trillion every 60 to 90 days to continue to prop up this entire facade. Okay? Now, during the Obama years, Swiss banks made a huge mistake. They made a huge mistake. And today, for those of you, I know we have several on the call, Credit Suisse, I guess he says Swiss, and Deutsche banks are on the verge of collapse. It says now Credit Suisse has lost 90 to 100 billion in depositors. Hi, Nori. No, don't step up there. You gotta stop it. I'm gonna put her in another room. Let's pause this. Let's pause. Okay. I had to put her in the other room because she was probably gonna walk on my keyboard and stop everything. Oh goodness. Okay. They have left the Swiss system. It says during the Obama years, the Swiss National Central Bank invested over $1 trillion in New York and Wall Street stocks, and they're tanking. It's all tanking. The only reason it's still propped up is because the Federal Reserve is pumping money in it to give everyone the illusion that we are stable, that it is stable, when in fact it's not. It's all an illusion. But I want to remind you, this is all being done on purpose. It says, and we'll get to the reasons at the end. So for those of you who are in Switzerland or around the world in Europe, the Swiss have a real issue. Most of the banks there are completely upside down. Between stocks, between treasuries, things they can't unload, the collapsing of the US dollar, because they did at least $100 billion in currency swaps. He says they're screwed. And the only way for them to get out of it would be to sell their gold. He says, now, you may have also heard some rumors about Russia and other countries talking about invading Switzerland. He says, well, that's because they want their gold back. They want their own gold that they had put on deposit in Zurich and Geneva, etc., etc. He says they want their gold back. And Switzerland is saying, well, no, you can't have it back. So that will be interesting to see how all that works out. Wouldn't that be interesting if that gold wasn't even on the planet? He says, wouldn't it be interesting if it was taken off world? Just a thought, he said, something for you to ponder. He says, so none of the banks around the world have shorts on gold. They have all gone long. Oh, little Pixie's gonna go sleep now. Okay, he says the problem is, especially for Western banks that are holding treasuries, which used to be like cash and holding dollars, he says they can't buy anything with it. We can't even buy goods with it because no one wants it. Of course not. So, the fate of the Federal Reserve note is sealed. It's over. It says it's done. It is over. It's only a matter of time now. So there's a lot of things going on in the background regarding the financial system. Now, this is all important because to take down the cabal that is involved in drug trafficking, satanic worship, child trafficking, organ harvesting, kidnapping, human sacrifice, all of this stuff, he says, which most people would find incomprehensible to imagine. All of this has to do with these same families that run the central bank system. Rothschilds, Rockefeller banking system. It says now, the only thing keeping this together for them is the fact that they have an illusionary control or a very strong manipulative hand controlling the price of gold and silver. The minute they begin to sell their own gold, which they're being forced into a position to do, they lose control of the gold and silver market. For example, here in the West, gold is selling for roughly $1,400 to $1,500 an ounce. It's been manipulated down from $1,900. The BRICS nations have their own metals market, in case you didn't know. They have their own metals market, and gold on the BRICS system is roughly going for $2,500 to $2,600. Silver is over $100. That's the true value of what these metals really are at this particular point. You see? Now, another thing that needs to be brought about, and I need to share with you, is that Credit Suisse, the Swiss National Central Bank, or Deutsche Bank, Bank of America, are up to their eyeballs in money laundering, and it involves narcotics, trafficking, and little people in cages. He says that twice, little people in cages. Now, these banks are not ever going to be rewarded for this thing that they've done, not to mention everything else that they have to answer for. But they're never going to be rewarded for this, for laundering money attached to little people in cages and everything that is associated with that. Bastards, right? It's all blood money. Says that twice. It's all blood money. So what you're seeing in this movement, and I'm going to talk some more about what's coming, is you are seeing the forced collapse of what you know as the global economy based on the fiat currency system. It's being done intentionally. It is not an accident. There is a real intention behind it, because as it collapses, it exposes more and more of who they are and what they are. It also exposes where they've hidden their wealth, because when they can't print money that nobody wants, they have to go to real assets and spend it in order to keep paying their bribes, paying their blackmails, etc., etc., etc. So this is all orchestrated. You're watching a movie, except the consequences are extremely real. Okay? So he says FTX, the crypto thing, that's going to expose all the rest of the fiat cryptocurrency system. And it is. All of that will come down as well, because the deep state and many of these dark satanic players have been dumping a lot of money into these fiat-backed, nothing-backed currency systems, cryptocurrency systems, thinking they could hide their wealth, thinking that the fiat system would never collapse. Little did they know, right? Well, they figured wrong. He says they figured wrong. Every BRICS nation, and I believe it's up to 33 or 34 now. Argentina just got their application. And actually, Egypt also has put in for that. I saw. Submitted their application to be part of BRICS as well. They're all targeting the fiat currency system, particularly the US dollar. He says, now, again, I have to reiterate, this has nothing to do with the American people. They were going to be hurt by this. And I'll come back to that in just a little bit. He says, I mean, y'all need to hear this because between now and the end of January, the world's going to turn upside down. Japan is dumping all of its treasury bonds, and they have trillions. They've been one of our best and biggest trade partners. They're dumping all their treasury bonds. They want nothing to do with it. because they understand the writings on the wall and they understand why. If you've noticed, they haven't pulled their corporations out of the United States. It says, well, they're probably not going to, because number one, they realize it's not the American people. And number two, they also understand there's another system behind this, that the current system we have, the fiat system, has to be completely washed away. Oh, I keep getting ringing in my ears. Y'all keep getting that ringing? Oh, it's been several times today. He says, and they get that. He says they do. They get that. So treasury bonds are completely in collapse. The central banks, the trillionaires, the billionaires, they're not trying to protect anybody but themselves. Of course. They only want all the maneuvers that they're making. They're only trying to protect themselves. Now, many of them are trying everything they can to buy metals, gold, silver, platinum, iridium, anything they can get their hands on. And they're panicking. What they don't realize is their wealth is the result, is crimes against humanity. But as they're doing this and they take it and they're trying to stash it away, they are exposing where the rest of it is as well, because they're creatures of habit. They've been doing this the same way over and over and over again. And they felt very safe because they bought the intelligence agencies. They bought the judicial system. They had the court system, the judges, anybody that could hurt them. They bribed, blackmailed, or put in a otherwise compromised position. That's all falling apart. That's all falling apart. Thank God, because they deserve every single bit of it. I hope you're panicking, bastards. And some very interesting times coming. But see, this is the whole system. They built this elaborate network to protect the criminality at the top. And that's why you've had already some of the top ringleaders taken out. But there has been a real focus in the last year on the middle management of this network. And the reason for that is because these are the guys who do the grunt work. If you were ever in the military, it would be like a sergeant or a colonel. He says they do most of the work. They make sure shit gets done, or they make other people do it. But they make sure that at the end of the day, the work is done. That's the middle management team. That's who's being stripped from them, from this cabal dark network. So what's happening is the system is collapsing because there's no one there to do the dirty work anymore. They have either flipped or they're at the spa singing, okay? So what the American people haven't been told is that Saudi Arabia not only told fake Joe Biden that hell no, but the deal was made that for payment of goods, they had to have real collateral. And Alex kind of chuckles and he laughs and he says, and it had to be paid with real collateral, something that was real, no longer paper and ink with pictures on it. So, in order for this to happen, he says, oh boy, he said the true managers of the United States gave assurances that the United States note, gold-backed USN, would be put into a trust. And as soon as it went live, they would be able to extract that money, that resource. It says, which would give everybody some comfort here, okay? To give you some comfort to know that in the background, this is already working and that the real manager of the country is all over this. It says, now, there's all kinds of talk about the Biden administration turning over the Health and Human Services to the WHO. He's not the real president. He has no power, okay? He has no power whatsoever. So, y'all don't need to worry about that shit. He says, okay? It's theater. Yes, he did it. Yes, that was the plan for the New World Order. And you're seeing what they wanted to do. Okay? He says the movie script is to show the people of the world who these people truly are. They wanted you to see just how far they would go to hurt you, to enslave you, and or to genocide, exterminate the human race. Are you awake yet? He says. Are you awake? Are you awake yet? And he laughs. He says, because that's what you're seeing. That is exactly what you're seeing. However, it's really important to note that the adults are actually in charge. They actually are in charge. He says, so let's keep going. He says, we now have the Federal Reserve cabal gasping for any air, any ability to be relevant. Said so, they are experiencing now with a digital currency. They can't do it outside the United States because there are no players. Everyone is literally like, go fuck yourself. We don't want any part of this. Take back your treasury bonds that you sold us because they're rubbish. And of course, the Federal Reserve doesn't have any real assets. It's all debt, and nobody wants debt, okay? Because they realize that the adults are in charge and that there's a new system behind it that's real. So they're going to talk to the adults, not the idiots. So the digital currency by the Federal Reserve is being tested with 12 banks here in the United States. It says, it is my opinion, ladies and gentlemen, after having researched this, says, now I'm not a currency specialist and I'm not a licensed broker. I'm just a simple guy who has several ounces of common sense. Says if you know what the system is and what it represents, and you know that the only assets this corporation, the Federal Reserve Bank, has is debt. Says that's all it has. Why would you buy their currency or any of their paper? And you should not, because it will not be long lived. It may just go a few weeks before it collapses on itself and it needs to die a very quick death so that we can be done with this. And it's important to note that in 2019, the unraveling of the US Treasury debt was occurring. The Treasury bonds nobody wanted, the Treasury bonds, says this actually started in 2019. Now, when the fake government can't sell paper for real assets, then it has to print worthless money. It says, well, that's interesting because that's exactly what they did, but they needed a cover in order to do this. So then we have Kufufu, Kofefe. Says, oh, I probably shouldn't say that. So I'm changing. He said the real word. I'm not going to say it because I'll get banned again. But you know what I mean. And he laughs and he says, okay, which still, by the way, has never been isolated even to this day. So we had the thing, and when they couldn't continue to hold that narrative, and that began to unravel, then they had to do Russia, Russia, Russia. And the whole thing with Ukraine. Because the fallback position, not only for the government, but for the military industrial complex, which basically runs things, is to go to war. So they tried desperately to make things happen in Ukraine, and they're still trying to do it. But if you've noticed, there's no wars, no battles, anything going on in the Middle East. Anywhere? It says anywhere. because the United States and Israel are not there stirring up the hornet's nest. They're not causing any trouble, and that means um, the military industrial complex is not there because no one wants to play with them anymore because they have nothing to offer them. Nobody's going to do it for free. Terrorists like to get paid. Isn't that true? But this system has nothing to offer them. It says, now, I've heard the Biden administration is wanting to stir up trouble in Syria. He says they'll get their asses kicked. So, if there's any military people here of which are listening to this, which I know there are, he says you don't want to play this game. Okay, this is real. We are down to removing a cancer on humanity and replacing it with genuine world peace and equality. So it's a very clear decision to make because all they're going to do is pay you with something that is worthless because it's collapsing anyway. It says even here it's going to fall apart completely. So you should not invest any of your energy, any of your time, even your life in dealing with these idiots and putting your family through all the things that they go through when they know that their husband or mother is in a war scenario, wondering night after night, day after day, if you're coming home. You shouldn't even bother to go there with this. It says Israel is being saved for last. Israel is the global center, the world center for organ harvesting and trafficking. Fact. It says fact. Now, is that the Jewish people? No. It's the fucking Khazarians. He says there may be some Hebrews in there who completely lost their way, but it is not the Jewish people, okay? I can't take back those things that I said again. I can't say those things again. He says, so I hope you got it. He says, we're watching the dissolution of NATO. NATO's going to collapse because there's no money to bribe everybody any longer. And whatever they were paid in bribe, they can't move. They can't transfer. They can't do anything with it because no one wants it. Okay. The Basel III currency implementation for all the world's banks, where they have to have a percentage of metals in their actual possession, financing and currencies, and the bonds that they themselves are selling. There has to be real assets behind it. It's been kicked down the can. He says, it's been kicked down the can, which, and I put in parentheses, I think he meant the can's been kicked down the road. That's the saying he kind of said. Sometimes he says things a little off, so he says a little bit further, and essentially what's happening is that the reason it's not been officially implemented or integrated globally is because Western banks would lose control of all the fake manipulation of gold and silver prices. They're absolutely terrified of that because the minute they lose control of that, all the Western banks collapse. They totally collapse because of all the derivatives. Yes, because they have sold paper gold and paper silver. They have sold more paper gold and paper silver than there is in entirety or ever was on planet Earth. That's how ridiculous it's gotten. And the only way they can keep it together, the facade that they've created, is to manage and manipulate the cost of gold and silver in the Western world. It says now, again, BRICS, they have their own metals market, okay? If you can pay attention to that, because that's the true price of what the real value could be should the West lose control of the manipulation of gold and silver prices out of London. Okay? Just so you know. The price of gold should be today between $4,000 and $5,000 per ounce. Silver should be right around $150 per ounce, or just a little bit over. That's where it ought to be. It says NATO countries are very quietly behind the scenes, behind closed doors and boardrooms, along with the military industrial complex, are wanting to invade Uganda. They want to declare it a terrorist country, even though they haven't done anything wrong, because they want to go in there with any excuse in order to take possession of the gold that is in that part of Africa. So we're going to want to pay attention to that, because this isn't over. Gold, nickel, and other precious metals is what's in that country. They do not have a military of their own that could stop this type of invasion. So other countries would be involved unless this whole system is taken down before they can even implement a plan, which is why we're having this conversation, okay? This is why we're having this conversation. Things are moving very, very quickly. The BRICS nations control 65% of the global economy already, and they contain 80% of the world's population. So the empire of homogeny of the United States and the Western world is already over. Sorry. There's things I write so fast, sometimes I can't read my own writing. I think you guys know that. And it's already done. He says they just haven't told the citizens yet. They have continued to create the facade that everything's okay. He said, we got this, when in fact, they've got nothing. They have raped, pillaged, they've done everything despicable under the sun to everyone. And you all need to know. You all need to know where we're exactly at. Now, for those of us in the United States, it could very well be that the 1st of January, 60% of the federal government is furloughed because there will be no money to pay them. And sadly, most of them will completely lose their pensions as well. Because all that's backing it up is treasury bonds issued by the corporate Federal Reserve, which are worthless, absolutely worthless. They're only worth something if someone wants to buy them, and nobody does. Nobody does, okay? The inequity, the deceitfulness of the Western governments and how they've treated not only the rest of the world, but even their own citizens has put them in a place where everybody wants them gone and nobody will ever miss them again once they're gone. That's really where it's at. It says many of the Western or major Western banks, if they're not in bankruptcy already, they will be very, very shortly. And what I'm talking about shortly, I mean within weeks. They will all be in bankruptcy. Now, depending on their business etiquette, now that's one thing to make bad loans and lose money. It's another thing to launder drug money, cartel money, human trafficking money, crimes against humanity money. And so that's a very different scenario. Those banks are not going to survive. They are never going to be rewarded to be allowed to stay in business. So the only one that I know of for sure is Deutsche Bank, Credit Suisse, and Bank of America. I know there's others, but until I have at least 2 or 3 confirmations, I can't say. But I can say that many Western banks, at least here in the United States, in the top 10, at least 8 are already in bankruptcy, and they're going through the only ones that actually know what's going on there is the board of directors. He says they're not telling their stockholders, they're not saying anything to anybody, and that's just what it is. I mean, that's who they are, okay? Why would we expect anything different? And he brings up a point. And there was a few years ago where there was a deal with Wells Fargo Bank here in the US. Um, a few years ago, they had a big thing about Wells Fargo opening accounts without people's knowledge. And that's exactly what happened to us. And I'm not sure if I kept the paperwork somewhere. I thought I did. I might have thrown it away. I should have kept it. But we got our home mortgage. Yeah, we got our home mortgage through Wells Fargo, which was great. But then, like shortly after our mortgage, apparently we got new debit cards in the mail from them. They had gone and opened a checking account in our name, sent us debit cards because that's how they wanted us to, but they wanted us to have a checking account with them. Like we didn't have our checking with them, we just got their home loan through them. So illegally, they fraudulently opened an account under our name. And I never used those debit cards. I should have called them at the time and complained, but I didn't. But see, these are the things that they've been doing fraudulently. Okay. It's horrible. He says it's important to note that many different fiat currencies, fake currencies, have been tried in the history of humanity, roughly going back 4,000 years. Not a single fake currency has ever survived. In fact, the United States Federal Reserve note is the longest living. It says the average was about 63, 64 years. That's the average. Federal Reserve note has gone considerably further than that, but it's now coming apart. All right. This is all important to know because they don't teach economics in school. You know they've rewritten history, and we will come to that here shortly, especially the economic system. We've all learned was to prop up the fake system, the debt slavery system. That's all we know. That's all our grandparents knew, although they did know at one point a quarter, a silver dollar was actual real silver. They also knew and were aware of the fact that the gold, that the money, that the dollar for a period of time was backed by gold. It says that changed in 1971. And the reason it changed was Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard because the French government approached our government and said, look, we want to cash in our treasuries and we want you to give us the gold. Says they're not stupid. They wanted the gold, and Nixon said, I'm not giving you the gold. So he released gold in the US dollar, the fiat dollar. He says it wasn't fiat then from the gold backed. He released it and the paper from the gold and the currency, and it's been a free for all ever since. And since 1971, the value of the dollar has depreciated to roughly 3 cents. He says that's really all it's worth is 3 cents. And in fact, to print a copper penny costs over a nickel, which is 5 cents. So that should tell you something. And he laughs. He says, okay. He says, yeah, it's pretty bizarre. He says, okay, there was another factor involved in the West's decision to begin the genocide of many of the world's population by 2030. It says, now, this was discussed behind closed doors at the United Nations, and what they talked about, and this involved all of the Western nations, is that by 2030, 2.5 billion people would be able to retire with pension funds, and the banks didn't have the money. Almost all the pensions are fraud because they're all backed by paper assets that are fiat. And even if they were to remain intact, they would pay you in fiat currency. That is literally worthless. It's amazing to hear all this. I get that. It says now, there are a lot of shills, a lot of people coming out of nowhere and are becoming extremely popular. And what troubles me is that guys like Michael Hollingsworth could get away with taking the work of so many other people who have been doing this type of work, this type of research, sharing this information about the New World Order and everything that's going on and the currency systems. And he can go out and create a name for himself as if it was all his material and never give anybody credit. Now he says, I'm real touchy about this. He says, having had that same thing happen to me, okay, where people take your work and present it as if it's their own, okay? This is why every video at the end, I say, please support Alex. This is not my work. I throw in my 2 cents worth for, things that I would like you to go research or things you should watch, or, I put in my 2 cents. But all this information is Alex, and I give him all the credit, okay? I've always given other people the credit for it if it's not mine, because it's not mine. And that's one thing, being a manager at work too, when something has to be redone on the floor or reset or whatever, I used to get very upset because I used to work with people, one in particular, who, after I would do a reset, they would take credit for it. And that is one thing that is a pet peeve with me. Do not take credit for something you did not do yourself. Okay? I can't stand it. I will not stand for it. He says the bottom line is that people will wake up. That's really what the mission is. He says, is that people wake up. That many of the researchers that did this work, that laid the foundation for the success of some of these other idiots or people, they should be acknowledged because they sacrificed the ultimate currency, and that was their time. Time is the ultimate currency on this planet. Doesn't that remind me of if you've watched Jupiter's Ascending? That's what they say in that movie, is that time. That's all they want is time. They use the essence of 100 different people to make that certain elixir that keeps them young, because time, that's what they want. They don't want money, they want time. He says it isn't gold, it isn't silver, it's your time. Can't take away any of that shit with you. He says, all you have is what you do with your time alive on this planet. What did you do with your time? What is it that you create? How do you treat others? He says, how do you raise your families? What do you do with your time? What did you invest it in? He says, that's the ultimate currency here, folks. It always has been, and it always will be. In any third, fourth, or fifth density physical body, says yes, the lifetimes are greater in other realms, but it still comes down to the same thing. What do you do with your time? What do you focus on? It says you're watching a movie, okay? I want to keep reminding all of you because things are going to start dropping and they're going to ramp up the fear. The whole fear porn thing. You need to realize that what you're watching is a very specific military operation that is strategically striking at the enemy to strip them naked so everyone can see and then collapse their complete diabolical empire, so that light can replace the darkness. Says you have to keep this in mind, because I read the chats, I read the boards, and I see everybody's starting to get nervous again, scared. He says, look, there's a plan. They're not going to dictate how it's all going to happen just yet, because we're in a war. We're in a war. It's a different kind of war than dropping bombs, nukes, everything else. It's very different, but nonetheless, it's a war. It's a war for the soul of humanity, of human beings. I'm also going to say this. It is my humble opinion that no one should ever get another Says pharmaceutical companies have said from here forth, starting in January, every will have the mRNA in it. Ladies and gentlemen, it does alter your, it changes it. It's also patented, which means your body belongs to them. Doesn't matter. You can say no, F you, whatever. Says, now that you know, why would you do it? Why would you do it now that you know? We have to starve these bastards. I see it all the time and I hear it where I work. People, oh, I got my flu. Oh, I got my shot. And I'm like, oh my God. And then they're wondering why everybody in town right now is sick. Everybody in my small town is sick. We were completely out of lozenges. We've been completely out of Motrin, Tylenol for children, completely. 2 shelves bare. We barely have any cold and flu medicine left. It is incredible. Everybody that's sick, everybody I've been ringing out has been sick. Okay. So I try with my immune system. I drink my pine needle tea. I have my drops, my echinacea. I take everything I can, my D3, my B12, my vitamin C. I take all of that every day so that when I go to work and I have to touch the things they just touched, and strep is big time going around with all the children. Yeah. I didn't think about that stuff when I started this job, that I would be dealing with sick people all the time during, the sick times of the year. That's another reason, like, I really kind of want to just quit. Oh, God. Ah, I just want to smack these people upside the head with a 2x4. And I just play along with it. Like, I could give them information, but then that's like going down a rabbit hole with these people and they're just not awake yet. So it's not even worth my energy to go into like telling them they shouldn't do it. I just kind of play along with it and like, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, like I just try to play along with it and I just send them light. I try to put a protective light around them that nothing happens to them. It's pretty much all I can do till these people wake up themselves and stop watching the mainstream media. Uh, he says, okay. He says, Jordan Sather, I don't watch him. Like I said, I think he talked about him before. I don't watch this person. Did a very nice interview. I don't know what you think of him. He's a very good researcher, but he did a very good video on Michael Hollingsworth. And he kind of laughed and he says, you might want to check it out, okay? Now let's talk about the Anunnaki and some history, etc. He says there's a lot of fear being circulated. There's a lot of panic. There's a lot of attacking going on. Attacking researchers, attacking people who have direct knowledge of what is both happening on the planet and off the planet. You are, of course, entitled to your opinion. You are, of course, in a position to share your thoughts and opinions. You are not, however, you don't have the right to trash someone that you not only do not know, but whose information is stellar. He says, now, let's explain something about the Anunnaki. Yes, they've been here a very long time. Some of them are still here in Israel, underground. They haven't been regressive. They've been somewhat neutral. There are some sleeping still, but it is important to note that our ancestors knew them well. They walked with them. They worked with them. They were educated by them. They were taught agriculture, horticulture, engineering, husbandry. They were taught everything we know today. We learned from them and or others who were from space off-world. The Sumerians write about them, and there were cultures even before the Sumerians, the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans also talk about the Venusians, the Babylonians, who often talk about the Syrians, the Egyptians, who talk about the Syrians, as well as some of the Anunnaki. The Indian culture talk about all of them. The Greek culture very much mirrors the Indian culture in talking about all of the gods and the wars of the gods. This is not news. This is not new. He says, ladies and gentlemen, but a lot of this history has been stripped and hidden. And whenever it came up, we were told that it was mythology. And it's not mythology, okay? There has been a very specific, intentional academic amnesia in giving us the true history of who we truly are. And to counter that history, religions were also created, that the fear of anything into anyone, should they have an encounter with something that they weren't familiar with. That was clear as mud, wasn't it? And he laughs. And he says, okay, the Roman Church, created all of this fear and all this repression of knowledge, sacred history, as much as they could. So much history that they could, in fact, retain power and control over others. They even went as far as to create trusts that declare that they not only own the planet, the Vatican, that they own the planet, they own every physical person on it and every building, and they owned all the souls, past, present, and future. They even went so far as to create trusts, putting that down in writing with a papal uh, let it. It says saying yes, that's time. Okay, so this is the system that's being taken down. If they wanted to destroy us, they would have done it already. That's not the plan here. The plan is for humanity to wake up and to rediscover who we are, to rediscover our humanity towards each other and to become part of the galactic family. That is our future, okay? You've already gone through 4 years of humanity being a slave. I think you meant 3 years. You've already gone through that, okay? It's now coming to light. If they wanted to keep you in that place, they would not even bring this up, would they? They would just keep you lollygagging right into more darkness, into a smaller cell. But that's not what's happening, is it? No, you're being awoken. You're being awakened to not only who you are, but what this holograph has been. That what's happening here, he says, please don't lose sight of that. This movement, everything that's happening is to free us from a matrix, a very, very dark matrix. It's really important to remember this, okay? It's really important to remember that what you're seeing is a movie. They told you this up front, guys. This is what we're going to do. I want you to know the purpose of this is so you can see who these beings are and what they're all about. It has to be done in a very specific way so that we can wake up as many people as possible, which shows a great deal of honor and integrity. They didn't just throw anybody away, okay? They just didn't throw anybody away. They're giving every single human being on this planet the opportunity to wake up. He says it's stellar. It is stellar the way they've done this and represented this. And for those of you who are impatient, you're just going to have to be a little bit more impatient. It says you're going to have to get over yourself, okay? Because we have one way to get this done, and this is how we're going about it. And this isn't just us. This involves off-world consciousness and intelligence and assistance. This is a group effort, and I mean, what's your alternative? He says, seriously, what's your alternative? Those of you saying, nothing's gonna happen, he said, oh my God, I am so sick of hearing this shit. He says, he says, you're a nitwit. If you can say shit like that, seriously, you're a nitwit. And yeah, I'm saying it. He says, yeah, I'm saying it. Because you got to get over yourself. So a lot of change is coming. If you're aware of it and you understand the reasons why it's occurring, there are things you can do to mentally and spiritually prepare yourselves. Physically, you can do some extra things too. Extra bottled water. Make sure your pantry is full of pastas and extra canned goods. Whatever it is that you guys need or eat, you figure it out, okay? For the rough patch that's coming. For those of us here in the United States, we've been the seed of this. It says we've been the seed of this darkness. Many of us have no idea, and those of us who did were shut down, ostracized. It says the rest of the story, but it's here. The comeuppance is here. It says retribution is literally next door, and we have to prepare for this. Now we're not the target, but we are going to experience the wrath. But when you see what our government is not capable of doing, which is the right thing, when you see what they are capable of doing, human trafficking, organ harvesting, kidnapping, theft, treason, sedition, you get the picture, right? Things cannot continue to go the way they are. It has to change, or there is no country. And at this point, we really cannot depend on another country to come in here and help us. It says because they're angry. They're very, very angry. And he says justifiably so. They're very angry. So this needs to be us, okay? When we're given the cue to help, we respond. It says we respond. Tomorrow, I'm doing a talk or a webinar, whatever, presentation with Dr. Sala. Tomorrow, December 3rd, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, which is noon Central, 11 Mountain, and 10 Pacific. He says, if you're at all interested, he says, I'm sort of, and I'm looking forward to it. It should be very enlightening. There's a lot of things to talk about. These particular things are never scripted. So, which is why I like them, because we can say what's on our mind and we can add our pieces of the puzzle. And for those of you who want to attack us, it says you just don't need to be there. In fact, we wouldn't want you there. So why don't you go to the mall? He says, or go shopping, okay? Or take your kids out for a hike. Do something with your children instead of being on the computer trashing everybody else. Just a thought, okay? He says, as you can tell, I'm in a rave form today. And he laughs. He says, that's all I got. I think we're ready for some questions. Probably aren't any, right? He says, nobody wants to talk to me now. And he laughs. I shouldn't be so lucky, right? Yeah, he was he was on a rant that day. Okay, so first question says there is chatter from various sources. There's another pandemic is in the process of being rolled out. This could result in a United States, if not worldwide, lockdown. Could this be a white hat operation, or is it associated with deep space? Do the comments from Elena and Thorhan about the last wave of darkness happening in the next 2 months factor into this? Any ideas? And Alex, his answer is thank you. That's a great question. I don't know Elena's last thing with Thorhan. I've not been following any of that at the moment, so I don't know what she said or what he said. But yeah, they're desperate to maintain control. And the latest pandemic they're trying to cook up is some kind of hemorrhagic fever where you bleed from all your orifices. And they're already They've already got video and they've already scripted the narrative of countries in Africa. And of course, they're going to create all of these narratives and it's going to happen here. It says, it's going to happen all over the world. And their intention is to alter your DNA with the NRA. Now we are genetic. He says, now we are genetic royalty. They want to destroy our DNA so that we are no longer genetic royalty. Now, who would have a problem with that? So, who would have a problem with that? We all would, right? Yeah. So that's why I say you should never do another one. Never do another. In my humble opinion, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a specialist. I'm just a researcher, and when I heard them say they were going to use the mRNA and all the moving forward, that should tell you everything. Is it a white hat operation? I can't say I honestly know that. Are they aware of it? I'm sure they are. Are they going to let this play itself out? I don't think so. Can you stop the idiots from going to their doctor and insisting on getting this poison? I don't know. I don't know that you can. Do they truly understand what they're doing? I don't know. It says, I don't know. And as I said, I don't think they do. They just don't because they keep watching the mainstream media and listening to the radio and go get it, go get it, go get it. The sad part about that is they continue to give their power away. They continue to give their power away. What do you do with people like that who just will not accept self-responsibility? They're going to give their power away to someone else to take care of themselves, to take care of them, because they won't do it themselves. What do you do with that? I don't know. And as he talks about that, like I was at work one day and I literally had, like I was ringing someone up and they were basically saying that I really wanted, he's basically saying, yeah, I want people to take care of me. I just looked at him like, okay, we are asleep, aren't we? Yeah, we're asleep. Just, I don't know how people they can't stand up for themselves. They just can't. And I just don't understand. No responsibility. Yeah. I can tell you that there are Portugal and Brazil, many other countries we're not hearing about. China, Europe, Spain, people are done with this shit. He says they are so over this. So I can't see it actually manifesting in any way, shape, or form. What they were able to do with the first non-isolated treatment, he says the first time, he says what they did with the treatment the first time has not been isolated. They still can't prove it's real. In other words, I just can't see them getting away with it. But it would show you their desperation and once again reinforce their dark agenda. I can't see it happening again because I think most people here, especially in the US, would be like, fuck you. You're not putting me on lockdown again. I'm not going through this shit. I don't think so. I don't think it would work. Ladies and gentlemen, he says, we are genetic royalty. Do not let them steal that from you. Ever. Ever. Next question. Q's recent post regarding our DNA goes hand in hand with what you have been saying to us. Can you offer some light on what the Q team meant when they say protect our DNA? Is there more to it than avoiding this? And Alex kind of laughs and he says, well, yeah, there is. Your entire history as a soul is contained in your DNA, your physical DNA, in the body you now carry or renting. He says there is always the possibility that you, in this physical body, can tap into your entire catalog of soul experiences and knowledge should you activate the third strand of DNA. Okay? We presently operate with 2 strands. We have a total of 12, but 10 have been turned off. That's another story. But the third strand is where your history is. Those who have already taken the mRNA, should they survive, have virtually no chance whatsoever triggering that awakening, because the writes its code to where you can't see the third strands or the fourth or the fifth or the sixth directly interferes with that ability. They knew what they were doing because they're dark, diabolical sons of bitches. Says, I've talked about this for 32 years. Many people have. Many people have talked about this. Many contactees, channelers, Dolores Cannon, Barbara Marciniak, Elena Danan, Lisa Royale. Many people have talked about this in the past. Many who are not with us anymore, but who laid the groundwork, the foundation, the base knowledge for all of us to have access to, should they want to. You should always give yourself the ability to evolve into something greater. Isn't that what you tell your kids at night while they're growing up? Son, daughter, you can be anything you put your mind to. You can do anything if you put your mind to it. Well, the same applies to you, and in that you can always be an actual living example to your children, and that speaks volumes, and to other members of your family, whether they're awake or not. If you let someone rob that from you for any reason whatsoever, and then want to do the same thing to your children or your loved ones, you seriously got to think about that. And you got to think about your reasons for this. What is your motivation to limit yourself in any way, or to let anyone limit you in any way? Who the hell are they to tell you you can't do something or be something? Whether it's third density, fourth density, or fifth density, or wherever, every single one of us has multi-dimensional structures in our brain. We know this to be a fact. Everyone's different as to the realm and dimension that these structures are talking to, or are connected to. It would be really interesting to see those who had whether those structures are in fact still turned on. I don't know. If I had the wherewithal, I would fly to Switzerland and say, this is what I want to do. I want you to do this to people who have had the treatment. Let's see what's there. I'm going to bet they're turned off, that they are no longer connected to source. You do not want to do this. You do not want to do this to yourself or to allow them to do this. They told you back in 1991 and in 1994 and in 2000 what they wanted to do was to remove 95% of humanity from the planet. Why are you still listening to these people? Why would anybody listen to these people? What we need to do is collect those 100 million billion. We need to give it to them. We should be giving them let's give them all 100 billion or whatever the number is. Let's give it all to them. It says, the CEO of Pfizer and Klaus Schwab, they got 100,000. Yeah, turn their asses into stone or rubber or whatever it is that's growing inside other people's veins, which is causing them to have strokes, cardiac arrest, and to die and cross over. Okay, he says, I'm in a way today. He says, obviously, you know that. Okay. Next question. You said only 400 million would be going through ascension. Do you know what that number was based on? You said those not able to make it would go back to source. Does that mean they're going to die? So along with ascension process, we're all going to leave at once, but we should keep our frequency high. What is the difference between Agenda 2030 and 2050 and ascension of 95% of population will never make it? How long will it take for ascension to be completed? And Alex says, I don't have those answers. Great question, and I do not know. And that was the number I was given in the 90s. I don't know if that number is still accurate. I'm going to guess it's probably more by now because more and more people are awakening. Back in the 90s, we were dense. We were really dense. And he laughs. He says, so I don't know what the number is today, but if the experts are right, between the treatment and the shedding, there's a very high probability we could lose half of the world's population in the next 5 to 7, 8 years because of the effects of the treatment. It says, now, should they be able to roll out the med things you sleep on, the healing tables, the holographic cameras? He says, does that turn around? I don't have that answer. And if I did, I'd tell you yesterday or right this minute, but I don't have that answer. I don't know where that technology is as far as it's being on the surface. There are new technologies coming out. People are using Royal Rife and Tesla and many of the other technologies that have been suppressed for quite some time. They're doing their best to get it to market. It's just that it's expensive to get this done, to create these things and then get them to market. The whole time you're fighting this totally corrupt medical system that thrives on making you sick and makes money when you die. They get paid either way. So there's no incentive for that. It's messed up. It's totally messed up. It's upside down. You know, most of us know there's been cures for cancer for 100+ years, but they can't make any money, this medical industrial complex, healing people. So they pretend to heal it. They create pharmaceuticals that mask the problem, that don't heal anything. And he has a big sigh. He says, and that's why I'm in a way. He says, you know, it's all messed up. It's totally messed up. And they just abuse humanity. They just continuously abuse humanity. And I'm fucking sick of it. He says, I just am. I'm so over it. We ought to capture an asteroid, put movie seats on it, and seat belt these suckers into it and send them out into space, you know, with 3 minutes of oxygen and let them beat up each other to be the last one to breathe. He says, it's just, I don't know. Says the darkness of it all is just, you know, sometimes there have been times in the last 30+ years knowing about what was happening to the kids where I just simply could not wrap my head around why people on the surface would do what they did and taking these kids and handing them over, knowing what was going to happen to them. I simply cannot wrap my head around. How does that person then go home to his own family? I simply don't understand. It says, I simply don't understand, and I still don't. I'm still tormented by it, frankly. Next question. The Wake Up World movie that you've told us is playing seems to be having an effect in places like China, Brazil, Iran, etc. Why does it seem that compared to those citizen uprisings, the US population is less active in opposing the deep state? Or is it just more of our opposition is happening behind the scenes or in court? Would having a peaceful millions in our streets be a good idea? I've been talking about that. Alex says, you know, that's a really good question, and it's a very interesting question. In the places where you see the rioting, many of these populations are not armed. They're doing peaceful demonstrations. They may hit somebody with a chair or a street sign, that kind of thing. Here in America, you're either awake or you're not. And there are a lot of people who are awake that are just staying real quiet, seeing what's going to happen here, because the thing about our situation is we're an army. The American nation is an army. And he laughs and he says, and any attacking military that comes in here attacking us across the border are never going home again. And I know they know that. They're never, they'll never go home. They will all die here. They will cross the oceans to get here to die, and we will defend it to the very end. So they would have gained nothing because there'd be nothing left. We would see to that. The issue is that let's just take a whole hypothetical, which I do not believe, which will ever occur, but let's take a huge hypo. He says, let's say that the white hats fail. Totally hypothetical, or totally hypothetical. The whole white hat thing is a psyop. He says we would still be in exactly the same position of having to defend our homes, our neighborhoods, and our country anyway. He says either way, we're the last stand. We, the people of the United States, were the last stand. And we would be extremely formidable, not to mention the fact that even the gangs, even the cartels in this country would join us. They would join us as well, and they're formidable to say the least. Law enforcement, veterans, active duty, formidable. We have 17 million hunters, licensed hunters, each one a sniper. And he laughs and he says, I mean, just think about that. You cannot lollygag into this country with a weapon and say we're taking over. He says, no. See, this is the issue with the southern border, and the military knows. The Border Patrol knows. Many people know what's been coming across the border, and the powers that be have been doing this intentionally, which is why many of them have already been replaced with stooges, clones, and actors. But they had to wake everybody up. Everybody had to see what was going on so we don't step into a civil war, fighting each other over wanting the exact same thing. You see, we would all want our freedom, but we would be turned on each other. But we would be turned on each other unless we saw the controlling mechanism and the deep state uh, which has been manipulating media, belief systems, everything that has to be seen. So we don't go to war with each other because ultimately we would want exactly the same thing, to be free and to be left the fuck alone. But they'd blow the whole thing up just to stay in power. And that's what's being exposed, not just here in the States, but in the world. They'd blow everything up. If they weren't afraid of us, they wouldn't have to kill 95% of us, would they? But they want to. They stated it and they implemented the plan. They've implemented the plan with the treatment. I hope that makes some sense. And I said that before too. Not only, yes, we're armed and we're an army, but as long as people are having to go to work and pay the bills so that their electricity doesn't get shut off, um, yeah, and they have food on the table and a roof over their head, people are going to work. If people didn't have to go to work, then they would be in the streets. Guarantee it. And what's interesting to me is with all this stuff, why have they not shut off? There's so many people on welfare, especially in food stamps and everything right now. And some of them, it's not their fault. But there are people, especially in this town that I live in, they do it on purpose. They live off the government. That's just how it is here. And it upsets me because people like us that work hard and pay taxes, we're paying for that. I see it to a point. But then, when you've got people who have 7, 10 kids and they're getting back all kinds of money and they're not even paying taxes, but yet somehow they're getting taxes back at the end of the year because of all their kids. Like, it just makes no sense to me. But it makes no sense why they haven't, if they shut off welfare, food stamps, people on unemployment, if they shut that off, you would see they would be in the streets. They would be in the streets protesting. But right now, they're just sitting back, just letting the money come in, and they don't have to do anything for it. So I just wonder. I really am surprised they have not shut that off yet. So anyway, and at times I have had to be on it. I had to be on it when I lost my job from American Express. Like, I was never on welfare because I was furloughed, but I still they only gave us $90 a month, me and my daughter, for food. So that was hardly anything. So I've been in the system for short amounts of time. I've been on unemployment throughout my life, short amounts of time, but I never took advantage of it like some people do. People do intentionally around here. They just do. Mm. It's only meant to be a bridge to get you through certain hard times, but people live off of it. Um, Next question. Any further follow up to my question about reptilians still showing up in healing sessions? James Gilliland is now saying the third density, fourth density, negative entities are still here. And Alex says, well, the fourth density are, but not the third. At least that's not what I'm told. But what we are seeing is lower fourth density, and that's because we're moving into lower fourth density. That's why. And I told you all years ago that we would see some shit in the lower fourth, that we were going to see some of this darkness that was in the lower fourth density. And if you go back to the earlier tapes, I talked about this years and years ago, that we would see some stuff. But that's just what I know. Now, there may be some reptilians here, but they're not regressive. They're wanting asylum. They are escaping from their own, and anyone who's had any UFO experience in Southeast Asia, in the jungles, you know for a fact there are beings there, families of beings there, that have found this little niche of their place in the jungles where they just want to be left alone. They were escaping, whether it was the Anunnaki, the reptilians, the Orion group. He says they wanted out. They did not want to be a part of that. So they hid, just like the Black League. They wanted no part of the draconian system. So we all migrated to different parts of the galaxy or out of the galaxy because we wanted no part of it. And we saw asylum, a place where we could start over and be. He says, just to be, and to be free as we could be, to raise our families, to start our families. Some of them are no different. It says, by the frequency who they are, where they're at on a frequency level. It says, you can tell by their own frequency, they're more afraid of us than we are of them. It says, now, Dr. Alcorn, he's the guy who asked the question. I'm not familiar with your work. I don't know if this is in hypnosis that you're doing this or if it's real time. Is this happening in the dream state where they're traveling out and they're running into a spiritual body and they're running into fourth density crap? He says, I don't know. But the regressive third density reptilians at all, I've been told, have been removed. Virtually removed. There's still some more pockets in Northeast Germany or Asia, Europe, and some pockets in China along the Mongolian border. There's a couple of pockets of stuff going on there. But the Mongolian military and the Chinese military are working together. In fact, the Mongolians are being given information from the Russians on how to deal with this. There's this particular group, because they've run them out of their country already. So there's a lot going on, guys. There is. So Doc, he says, that's what I know. Next question. Did the Roman Catholic Church insert two major inventions in the New Testament? One, access to God only through Jesus Christ and priests as our advocates to God. And two, drinking wine and eating bread, Eucharist, as a cannibalistic reptilian symbol during Jesus' Last Supper. George Kavasilis talked a lot about that, about how the Catholic Church, when they do the blood of Christ and the host body of Christ and they eat it, he talked a lot about that being cannibalistic, and that's satanic. That's a satanic ritual. And this was, 12 years ago. And Alex thought for a long time, and he was like, shoo. He says, I love these heretical questions. And he laughs and he says, probably we know that the Old Testament and New Testament have been rewritten, and rewritten. We know that most of the story of Moses and Abraham was actually about the Chaldeans. It wasn't about the Hebrews, or at that time, they were known as the Ibris. They were known as the wanderers, the gypsies. They later became Hebrew, and then turn of the century, they became known as the Jews. It says the British Museum has the Sinai Bible. It is the oldest known Bible that we know of today in existence. It was put together in 500 AD, somewhere between 470 and 510 AD. They are deciphering it, and as they decipher it, they are putting it up on their website. So you'd have to go to the British Museum and type in the Sinai Bible, and somewhere on there, they have what they've transcribed, what they said, and what the King James Bible says today. They have already found over 15,000 discrepancies, major discrepancies. And if you want to read the Naked Bible by Bigliano, I think it's, who was an archivist and a translator for the Vatican for 10 years. That will also help you come to the realization that the church had an agenda. They had an agenda, and that agenda was about control. And then you have the personal letters of at least 5 popes talking about how wealthy the church had become by selling the myth of Christ. Now, these are their letters. These are their words. And then you have the National Museum of Turkey in Istanbul that showed a scroll written by a Grecian senator that was dated 33 AD, or I believe 34 AD, of a talk given to the Greek Senate by Apollonius of Tyana, aka Saul of Tarsus. And it was in fact the Sermon on the Mount. And the Catholic Church for 900 years tried to steal it, buy it, whatever they had to do to get it out of the hands of Turkey. They still have it. They have never surrendered it. So, there's questions. But like most of our history that we know nothing about, it's been hidden, buried, stripped, burned. And what's interesting is the same culprit keeps showing up when it comes to the destruction of our history. And that's the Vatican, the Catholic Church, the Roman Empire. They keep showing up doing this shit. That's a journey each one has to do individually if they're up to it. It says, if they're up to it. Now, was there a Jesus? Yes. In fact, there were 3 that are prominently mentioned in history. Each one of them was remarkable. But I wasn't there. I wasn't there to know. I have my own opinion on it, after having spent 40 years researching everything that I could get my hands on. And I have my own opinion, and it will remain my opinion. But I think if you really want to know, I just gave you a lot of stuff to do, to research. All you have to do is have an open mind. If it resonates, great. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. That's okay. For those of you who are new to the call, if you want to catch up on the whole UFO ET thing, one of the best books you can start with is The Gods of Eden by William Brambley. It will open a window. If you actually read the whole thing, it will open a window in your head, okay? It'd be like a skylight. It'll put a skylight in your brain, and right now, that would be a good thing because there's a lot of things going on, and what we've been taught, mostly what we've been taught, has been absolute garbage. Next question. Are we the last ones to free ourselves from the deep state, draconian, Orion AI bondage because they implanted themselves more deeply here than elsewhere, or because we've been more resistant than other civilizations to waking up and liberating ourselves? And Alex says, that's a great question. That's a really great question. He says, and I'll give you the scenario I was told. As other star systems were freed, those regressives that escape found refuge in other places of controlled solar systems. And as the next one became freed, then they would escape again, and eventually, yeah, we're the last. So we had the worst of the worst here. And at the same time, the powers that be on both sides understood that the showdown would be here in our solar system. Being strategic and thinking, being strategic to be able to go back and forth in time and the merging of different timelines into one. They knew what the probabilities were to be. Plus, we're talking about people from the future coming back and sharing their knowledge of the situation. Our solar system was always going to be the Armageddon between good and evil, light and dark, free and slave. It was always going to be. And they knew that, which is why there was such an intense influctuation of souls, either walking in or being born into the human race from a very, very high level, a very high spiritual level, realms at the very top. It was to bring in that light and to bring in that consciousness. Sadly, the enemy had no honor about anything whatsoever. They didn't even honor their own. And this couldn't happen in an organic way where we would just push the light out based on the consciousness of the humanity itself. Instead, what they did is they targeted the children. This has been going on for quite some time on Earth, which is why physical and spiritual intervention was necessary. Because out of all the other systems that they chased the Orion groups, the draconian groups out of all those star systems that they chased them out, they all fucking ended up here. Those that didn't die ended up here. So this is it. He says this is it. It's a win or take all. And this would be the absolute end of the Orion Empire and their rule of grief, death, and trauma. It ends here. It ends here. It says they put all their apples in this basket. And he laughs and he says, and this is where we're at. Fortunately, we're a lot further along in winning this. I think it was probably good that humanity didn't know just how behind the eight ball we were, because our consciousness would have dramatically shifted into poor me, poor us. He says, we're never going to be free. We would have spiraled because of all the conditioning we already had been subject to. So, he says, but it had to happen this way. The way it's being played out, it had to happen this way. And that Space Force, to the White Hats, to the Alliance, to all the others that are here in either active or a supporting role, the dimensional knowledge that's being shared. He says, I, for one, am profoundly grateful. So am I. Because the interaction, the collective consciousness that has been pulled together has changed the civilizations that are involved in this, regardless of their dimensional realm, forever. Forever. It's created a unity of maybe our galaxy hasn't had before. So he says, and we've been a part of that, and we will derive a great deal of benefit from this unity. It's exciting times. It's really, really is exciting times. There will be a lot of movies and books written about this. There will be historical documents. And he laughs and he says, there will be many films that will be historical documents recording this for future preservation and for future generations. Next question. Do you believe that those of us who make it through the transition will experience a longer physical life on Earth than we've been expecting? And Alex says, it's possible. It's certainly possible. If we can benefit from the healing modalities that have been suppressed and the technology that not only cures the body, but it removes parasites from the body, which is the biggest thing all of us have to contend with, then yes, we can extend our lives well into over 200, 270 years of age range. It says now, further than that, I don't know. I'd be happy with a life like that. I'd be very happy with that. Then I could get my entire bucket list done, the honeydews. And he laughed. I could get everything done. See my kids graduate, see my grandkids, great grandkids, great great grandkids, He says, I could spoil them all down the line. Papa, he says, I'd be good with that. There might be some who go off world that can extend it even further. There will be the creation of avatar bodies. Technically, they already exist, where you would move your soul into an avatar body that may give you 1,000 years in a single form, if that's what you so choose. So there's all kinds of things that are possible. He says, that's the thing about being free and being consciously aware is there's no limit to what you can achieve. There really isn't. He says, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and a privilege to spend my Friday afternoon with you. I will see you again next Friday, and there will be a whole lot more to talk about. And he basically said, December 3rd, Dr. Sala had his webinar. So he says that is tomorrow. His presentation and webinar, and those are always good, always informative, lots of information, and I will be there. Lady Danan will be there. Obviously, Dr. Sella will be there, and I don't know if he's going to have some other folks involved with that as well. He says, but the roundtable stuff is good because we talk out loud and we bounce a lot of ideas, and it's all good, and that's what we need. We need information so that we can continue to have a higher perspective. So we can be 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 feet above looking down at the field so we understand what's going on. So that when our friends and our loved ones come to us and say, what the hell is going on? You can very clearly spell it out for them and give them some comfort and some relief and some understanding about what's going on. And that's what we're here for. That's our mission. Okay. That's the mission. It says, guys, I love you. See you next week. Okay. That was a long one, right? All right. So currently I'm working on December 16th webinar. Like I said, to kind of get caught up because he hasn't been taking a break since the end of October. I've just been doing the webinars. I haven't done 2 of the question and answer webinars that he's been doing. Because I just want to get caught up and let you guys know the latest information instead of like a month or 2 old. Because we don't know when the bobber's gonna flip. He says turn on a dime, and I like to I like to think of it as this fishing bobber, and it's being pulled and it's being pulled and it's being pulled, and one day it's just gonna pop down or pop completely over, and everything's gonna flip. So information can change really quickly, and it's coming in all the time lately. So if you love this information, give it a thumbs up. That really helps other people get to see it. Hopefully, YouTube will show it to more people. Yeah, so share this, spread this information. Um, go support Alex and JP and James. You can go to alexcollier.org and find a lot of his information, a lot of his like his book, Defending Sacred Ground, a lot of the older webinars. You can go to brighteon.com. Alex Collier Official 2 is his site there. He has all of his webinars and question and answer webinars. There's a small fee on those, $4.99 and $5.99. So I have so many of those in my library. Anyway, but yeah, go support Alex. Thank you so much for watching. I love all of you guys. I know it's been rough, and I will be so glad when the holidays are over. And I'm just looking forward to a new year in 2023, and we know more of the light is coming through that end of the tunnel. And things are going to start looking up. And I know we're just sitting back going, oh my God, when's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? What are the big things going to happen? Yeah, there's small things every day, but we're hanging in there, right? I mean, that's all you can do is live in the present. That's all I can do because my insanity would just be gone. So, yes, hopefully I will get some of this done over the holiday weekend for the next one. And I wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a good New Year. And just continue to shine your light, be that lighthouse. So the rest of these dark lost ships at sea hopefully will wake up. Okay. So say we all. Okay. I have my angel wings ring on today. I don't wear it too often because it's a little big and it tends to snag on things. But anyway, I love all of you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye. Hugs to you all. Bye.